What's up, everyone? Welcome to Beyond the Court, episode 12. We are so happy that you're here joining us today. My name is Agent P, also known as Pan, and I'm joined by Anwar, Daryl, and Amir as well. Today, we have a special guest in the building, the one and only Eric Smith of Sportsnet and Sportsnet 590 The Fan is joining us today. Eric Smith has been working at Sportsnet and Sportsnet 590 The Fan, covering the Raptors in some capacity for more than 20 plus years. He has also done work for Global TV Sports as their Raptors NBA analyst, and he has also appeared on CNN, NBA TV, CBC Newsworld, and more. He is the radio voice for the Toronto Raptors radio broadcast, as well as a full-time sports talk radio host. When he is not working on the radio, Eric jumps over to TV, working the sidelines and hosting the pregame and halftime shows for the Raptors broadcast on Sportsnet. Since 2005, Eric has worked alongside Paul Jones during the radio broadcast. From 2005 to 2014, Eric served as the color commentator while Paul Jones handled the play-by-play. From 2014 onwards, Eric moved over to the play-by-play role while Paul Jones switched over to color analyst. Additionally, Eric is also a columnist for Sportsnet.ca. Eric has served as one of the tennis play-by-play voices for the Rogers Cup, and he used to host Blue Jays Express, a Sportsnet 360 TV program that followed each Toronto Blue Jays game. In 2012, Eric was the TV play-by-play voice for men's boxing on the Canadian Olympic broadcast at the London Summer Games. Eric currently has a show titled Midweek with Eric Smith streaming live on Instagram, and he is also on the radio for a show alongside Paul Jones titled Smith and Jones. Welcome, Eric, to our podcast.
Man, that was a mouthful. I appreciate that. How you doing, guys?
No worries. Thank you so much for joining us. So just to start off, thank you for joining us, Eric. How are you doing during this time of the pandemic amidst everything that's going on?
I'm doing okay. It was, kind of a little bit confusing, scary initially. If we go back to the second week of March when, I flew back with the Raptors from Salt Lake City in their final regular season game, at least up until this point, their final game, only to find out, less than 48 hours later that the entire team, including the broadcast crews, which I'm a part of, that we had to be tested. Because there was, concern that we might have been, come in contact with Rudy Gobert, and we would later find out Donovan Mitchell as well. Right. So we had to be tested. So I went through the whole, COVID testing and had those big swabs up my nose and had to sit around and, wait for the results. And, luckily things came back negative, but still went through the whole 14-day quarantine isolation and, stayed apart from my family and stayed upstairs in my bedroom for 14 days and had my wife and kid leaving food at the door for me, and I'd Skype down with them or message down to them in the kitchen to bring me a snack or to bring me a coffee or whatever, and stayed in the room for 14 days. So it was a little bit harrowing to kind of start things, but as time's gone on, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like maybe it was because of the fact that I was tested, maybe because I'm an admitted hypochondriac and germaphobe on a normal basis during regular times. But I've stayed pretty strict and pretty diligent during these last 4 months. We've, as a family, I still have yet to order takeout. It's not that I don't want to support local business, but I have not ordered takeout once. I had not even a pizza. I haven't been to a patio since that's been open. I'd say 99% of my shopping, groceries or otherwise, has been either delivery or curbside pickup. I think I've been in like 3 stores, physically in 3 stores in 4 months. So I'm definitely been kind of the poster child for social distancing and masking and limiting exposure and interaction with family or friends. Since the nice weather has come upon us these last 6-8 weeks, we'll have friends or family over in the backyard, but the chairs or the little patio furniture, it's set up 6 feet. Nobody's going inside the house to use the bathroom. It's either, go in the bushes or go home. We're staying pretty strict and
Yeah.
diligent about it, and it's probably toughest on my kid. You know, he's an only child,
Mm.
so for him to not be able to have a sibling or a built-in playmate, that's tough. And his playtime with friends is basically sitting 6 feet away and just having a conversation or going for a distanced bike ride, things like that. But I think it's kind of what we need to do right now. So in a very long-winded way, that's kind of how I've been dealing with it. I think, as a result, knock on wood, I've stayed healthy and strong. My family has as well. And we're trying to do our part, not just for ourselves, but for our community and society. And it's, I guess, the internal battle that we all have, the four of us and everybody watching, with what do you feel comfortable with?
Right.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm going to tell you how I feel and what I think should be done. But it's not for me to judge if you're being a little bit more lax with the rules or lax with things than I am, or if you're being a little more understanding or you're open to a little more than what I am. I think it's kind of up to an individual right now how they're sort of dealing with this and where their mindset is. And as I acknowledge, as I said, it might be because I had that sort of initial scare
Right.
out of the gate, that I've been, taking more of the cautious approach to things, while recognizing that at some point we probably all have to get back to some sense of normalcy, to help stimulate the economy, if
Right.
nothing else, while still being conscious of the reality that there is a very serious virus out there that will be kind of over our shoulder for the foreseeable future until, of course, there is a cure, a vaccine, a remedy, something that can kind of give us all a little bit more reason to be more optimistic or feeling a little bit more safe.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with what you said. I mean, just gauging, as an individual, but also being mindful of the current times and what we're dealing with as a society and
Yeah.
as a public as well, and just maintaining that, and respecting what's happening as a whole, and acknowledging the seriousness of the matter as well. So, Eric, I know, just want to segue over. We know you've covered the Raptors for the better part of 20 plus years, and as part of your journey, you have witnessed different versions of and iterations of the roster and the teams. Could you walk us through how you felt, when that final buzzer sounded and the Raptors were finally able to hoist that NBA championship last season?
Yeah, I mean, on a totally personal, selfish level, it was an honor and a privilege to be lucky enough to have the call of that game. As you kind of went over my resume, I guess, there at the beginning. These last handful of years, I've flipped and kind of juked and jived back and forth between radio and TV because of the ownership of the team being Bell and Rogers, and as a Rogers guy, I don't do any of the work on the Bell side of things, so that opens up the door for me to do the TV, the radio. So as the playoffs went on, I was sidelines for this game, but I was radio for that game, and radio for that game, but sidelines for this game. So I was on the sidelines, but I didn't have the radio call for the Kawhi shot against the Sixers.
Mm.
But as it turned out, the Fan 590 had the radio call for Game 6 of the final. So to know, selfishly speaking, that I had a little bit of, a tiny little piece of history by having the call of that final game, at least on the radio side. And Matt Devlin had an incredible call, an incredible finish. But to more specifically answer your question, to just witness that, and to your point, to see it come to fruition and kind of come full circle, because you're right, there's a lot of people that have maybe been a Raptor fan for 3 years, for 5 years, for 7 years, for 10 years, but
Yeah.
to be there from the beginning, or damn near from the beginning. I mean, I was there from the beginning because I was a fan in the stands for the first season, and I sat in the stands for not only games at then Skydome, but at Cops Coliseum, and I was covering games at Maple Leaf Gardens as well when the Raptors had a couple of games at the old Gardens before Air Canada Center, Scotiabank Arena opened up. So, I went through the 20 and 62 seasons, or 22 and 60 and 33 win seasons and whatnot, and went through the struggles. So to see this thing now, where it's been for the better part of 3/4 of a decade now, as a consistent and regular postseason team, let alone conference finals team, then of course now championship and championship winning team. It was special. It was special to think that you were a very, very, very small part of it, whether it be as a broadcaster, as a fan, whatever it may be. Everybody kind of takes a piece of ownership of this thing, not just the players and the coaches and the management and the organization. I think everybody shares in this from where it was built. I'm pretty confident I'm a little bit older than all three of you guys, but I can remember a time where there were many in this country, whether it be, television and radio executives to advertisers to just average Joe fans that were saying, this is never going to fly. This team won't last.
Right.
Nobody cares about this team, or nobody cares about this sport. This is a hockey country. Basketball's not going to fly here. All that stuff that was always garbaged, in my opinion, from the get-go.
Agreed.
To see it now 25 years later, and to see that team hoisting the championship, and to see the nationwide celebration that was going on as well in so many cities across the country, and the numbers and the ratings for television and radio just skyrocketing with every game, every series, every round that went by. It was special to see, and I think it's just something that's become ingrained in our fabric as sports fans, as Canadians, as time's gone on, and it's been awesome to see the evolution.
Yeah, and I think even for us as a group, just being diehard Raptors fans as well, and also experiencing the lows and the heartache of whether the team makes the playoffs or not, or just playoff runs that are halted, or running into LeBron and just and hitting a roadblock as well. What a joy it was just to see that just monumental and memorable moment when we were able.
Well, and I'll tell you quickly as well. The real special thing too was there are some, I'm sure, that will say, and they're not wrong for thinking this, that it would have been amazing to win the championship on your home floor in Toronto. But there's also kind of something cool about winning it on the road, where, with no disrespect to everything I just said about everybody having a piece of it and the fans and whatnot, there is kind of something special about a team saying, at the end of the day, it's us.
Yeah.
Win or lose, it's us. It's our 15 guys, it's our 30 guys, 40 guys, whatever, if we include coaches and trainers and everybody else. It's us in the locker room. And to be able to do it on the road in a traditionally one of the loudest, most rabid buildings in the league, the old Oracle Arena, but then to have that opportunity to celebrate with thousands of fans that actually were in attendance. I still marvel to this day. I can't imagine the cost. Yeah. Like, I know I'm cheap, but like, I wouldn't have paid the money like for a flight and a hotel, let alone the tickets. I mean, the tickets themselves must have been, God, I don't even know, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 for tickets to the finals, to tickets to a potential clinching game in the finals, and to see 2,000-3,000 at least fans in the stands, there for the trophy celebration, there for the party afterwards, singing "O Canada," the Raptor jerseys, the Canadian flags, the party that went on in Oracle, let alone that spilled into the streets of Oakland and San Francisco afterwards. It was amazing to see, and it obviously is not the same as 20,000 Raptor fans being back home, but it was pretty damn cool to have that many folks there to share in that and to kind of be there to witness it. So that added to the special moment as well. And I still think back to just I pulled out my phone and recorded all the folks singing and just the Canadian let alone Raptor pride that was there in that building.
Yeah, and you also think about it like the Raptors closed out Oracle, right? Like that was the last game that was played at Oracle, and it wasn't the home team. It was visiting team that won the championship and ended Oracle, right? So I think it's going to go down in history as a big moment too.
Well, not just that last game, the last three games. There's one, right? They won every single game on the road in that final. So I mean, it's pretty incredible to think. Historic. And then I mean, listen, the Warriors obviously a far different team this year, with all the injuries they had. But even then, the Raptors going to the new Chase Center in San Francisco this year and winning that first game. So they've kind of, as bad as things were for a long time for the Raptors against the Warriors, they certainly have had Golden State's number now for quite some time. And hopefully that's a trend that continues on into next season or whatever may come.
For sure.
And just to touch on, as we inch ever so closely to the resumption of this current NBA season on July 31st, has there been anything, Eric, that has surprised you so far in the process, or even the steps that the NBA has taken so far? Do you feel this is the right move in terms of the restart and the resumption?
I I'll be honest with you, I flip flop on a daily basis, and I hate to sound like so kind of wishy washy on it, but and somebody even kind of called me out a little bit the other day on Twitter, and I kind of had to sit back and think, like, is that a valid criticism or not? Like, okay, maybe there is some validity in it, because as I say again, I'm one of these people that has taken a very cautious approach to my everyday life here in Ontario and in the Greater Toronto area. So on one hand, is it hypocritical of me to sit here and say, I'm not going to stores, I'm not ordering food, I'm not doing this, and I'm staying bunkered in while I'm openly promoting and talking about going to Orlando and the NBA resuming and whatnot. I can appreciate that there might be some validity, in that criticism or in that comparison. Right. I think for me, the way I justify it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong in justifying it this way. I justify it in saying the NBA is doing everything in their power to make this as safe as possible. Mm-hmm. It may not turn out that way, but they're doing everything they possibly can. If you were to tell me, Eric, you got a chance to wake up every day and be in a bubble with daily testing, with no outsiders coming in, and everybody that entered that bubble is not entered or is not entering or not allowed to enter unless they are testing negative and they're COVID free. That to me is where I say the comparison then isn't fair of like, hey, I walk out my door, I don't know who I'm going to encounter if I go for a walk, if I go for a run, a bike ride, if I take the dog out, if I decide to go to a store, even if I'm wearing a mask, is somebody else wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, and who's touching what, who's handling what products, and whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. I'm risking something by walking out my front door. Risk might be very, very, very low. It might be high. I don't know. So that's why I've taken that cautious approach. You would assume or hope, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that if everybody that is entering the bubble in the NBA has tested negative and the exposure is minimal at best, you would hope in theory, especially with daily testing and with consultation from the top medical folks available and all the cleaning procedures and protocols in place and all of the precautions being taken, that the bubble may be one of the safest places in North America, in the world, to be at. And that's, again, where I kind of feel in my mind, where I justify the difference of why maybe I, as a man, am not preaching in my own home, in my own community, what I might be preaching as it relates to the NBA and the Orlando bubble. I still think there's reason to be somewhat skeptical. I'm kind of pausing or hesitating to say pessimistic. I don't know if anybody should be optimistic or pessimistic right now. I think they should be realistic about the pros and cons, about the potential pros and cons. And I think I can acknowledge that those that might have a little bit more skepticism, I can see why. And it might be kind of that wait and see approach. I want to wait and see how this first week goes, how the second week goes. Right. Are there any positive tests that come in? Is there anything bad to come out of this? Or do I, again, take that wait and see and go, okay, hold on. No positive tests. Players seem to be enjoying it. Quality of play is going well. Not a lot of complaints coming out of the bubble. And again, the biggest thing, no real, issues, medically speaking, health-wise. So now I feel more comfortable. So I can appreciate, again, taking that realistic approach. And even if some of that skepticism creeps in with trying to be realistic about things.
Right.
All right, cool. Before I get into this next question, I just got to say, I listen to a lot of the radio podcast or the radio broadcasts you do. And honestly, you do a great job. Very entertaining. And I always I can always hear the passion in your broadcasting and coming through. I listen to a lot of the radio. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. The next question is a two-part one. But so if play does resume, how do you like the Raptors' chances in this modified end to the season and pending playoffs? And which team would you say poses the greatest threat to the Raptors' chances of getting back to the finals and potentially repeating as champions?
I like their chances simply because of the fact that, even before the shutdown, I thought they had proven already that they were a hell of a team. When we talk about second best in the East and third best overall in the NBA and, either ranked first or second in opponents' points per game and opponents' field goal percentage. So to me, defense wins championships. Defense wins in the playoffs. We saw that last year, and the Raptors proved over the course of 60-plus games in the regular season this year, that even without their best defender last year in Kawhi Leonard, they were still a hell of a defensive team. And even in spite of all of the injuries, they had multiple injuries. I mean, you talk about 10, 15-plus games for, Van Vliet, Lowry, Siakam, Gasol, Powell, Thomas, the list goes on.
Devastated.
Still managed to do what they did. So that gave me reason to be optimistic about the restart when you figure, all right, there's the old cliche of rest versus rust. Well, I think there's going to be rest and or rust for every team. But those that were banged up got a chance to get maybe a little more rest and not as much rust, because you now enter the restart with a healthy Powell, a healthy Gasol, a healthy everybody. Right. So I think that bodes well for a veteran team, certainly, and a veteran team that has playoff experience, championship pedigree now, knowing what it takes to win. And my feeling now, guys, is the same as it was at the beginning of the regular season. If we go back to, and I promise you there's got to be a radio clip, a TV clip, even something written where I promise you I said this damn near word for word in September, October. I felt Milwaukee was the best team again in the East based on just talent on paper, but the Raptors were right there. Even as reigning champs, you had to factor in no Kawhi, no Danny Green. The Raptors were right there with Philly, Boston. I thought Brooklyn, based on this, had things been healthy. I didn't think Miami would be as good as they were. I didn't think the Pacers would be as good as they were, but I had basically felt the Raptors had every reason to believe they were right there in the mix. And then factoring in what they did last year against the Bucks in winning 4 straight and eliminating Milwaukee and doing it, with knockout punches that came on the road and whatnot as well.
Right.
I felt that there was every reason to think, why can't we beat the Bucks again? Is Milwaukee going to be better or worse than last year losing a guy like a Malcolm Brogdon? Or are they going to be a little bit better because they've got some of that experience now and they're going to be hardened by that loss in the conference finals in the 4 straight that they lost to the Raptors? So again, I know this is very long-winded, but I felt that Toronto had every reason to think that they could compete with the Bucks, knock off the Bucks, and go back to the finals. My feeling is exactly the same right now, because that's how it played out over the course of 60-plus games. And as I said just a couple of minutes ago, everybody's now entering the restart pretty much from the same position. So I think Toronto definitely has a chance to go back. Now, who stands in the way? I still think it's the Bucks that are the best of the best, Toronto, Milwaukee. That's what I kind of foresee the most likely scenario. If I had to give you one other team, I would put Boston ahead of anybody else. In my opinion. And then when we look at the West, there's a lot of people loving the Clippers, and understandably so, but I still think that this is a Lakers thing right now. If I had to pick a potential winner, I might say the Lakers have the best odds, the best chances, even with an Avery Bradley being sidelined. I think LeBron, the way he played this year. Yeah, I mean, and maybe Howard as well. He was still kind of trying to wait and find out here. I just think that the Lakers have got a lot of firepower. And LeBron was playing like an absolute monster this year. And if he, at his age, got 3 months to rest and to recuperate, that could be a dangerous thing with him and Anthony Davis. So those, I guess, would be my 3-4 clubs that I'm keeping the biggest eye on.
Yeah, we totally agree. I think most of us here said Boston as well was the biggest threat. And then with JaVale McGee and Anthony Davis, that's going to be hard. That's rim protection.
Yeah.
So for this last question here, for the Raptors to replicate last season's success, who would you say is the team's biggest X factor that can get them over the hump?
That's a good question, because I could probably give you. I mean, all 4 of us might have different answers, and I think that speaks to what this team has kind of become. Like, Pascal had a hell of a season to this point, and I'm not taking anything away from him, but the first 30 odd were better than the last 30. And it's not like the last 30 weren't good, but he certainly kind of exploded this season to start. And then kind of, again, I'm not saying this in a negative way. He kind of settled, and he settled at a very good level. Like, he was still playing at an all-star level, but it just wasn't with the same kind of maybe flourish as he had at the beginning of the season. And that, to me, in a weird or warped way, is a good thing, because it speaks to then how everybody else was stepping up as well, where he didn't have to maybe carry the load because Powell was playing the best basketball of his life. because Lowry continued to play strong, because Van Vliet was doing so well, because OG was healthy this year and starting to contribute in other ways and having some real peak performances, because Serge Ibaka continued to play so well. So I don't know if I can pick one guy. If I was forced to, I might say Van Vliet, because as much as we talk about, and understandably so, the way Kawhi played last year throughout the postseason, the way Siakam played, the monster games and performances that Lowry turned in, or the times that Gasol was an X factor. I would say that as the postseason went on, remember, he struggled mightily in the first couple of rounds, and it was kind of late in the Philly series, that the light went on, and then certainly against Milwaukee, and then definitely in the finals, and the legend of Fred Jr. and everything else. Van Vliet became, right? Like, Van Vliet was awesome.
He made his name. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that his ability to play on the ball, off the ball, alongside Lowry, his playmaking skills, he's just got that tenacity, that chip on his shoulder, where he's not afraid to take the shot, afraid to make the play, afraid to make to have the ball in his hands. I think ultimately, again, if I'm forced to pick one, I think he might be my guy, because whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, whether he's running the first unit, the second unit, finishing games, whatever, I think there's so much that he brings to the table that he might be ultimately the guy that I go with.
Yeah, and I'd say that's a solid selection just in terms of his clutch shot making ability and just what he even showed last season during the postseason as well, in those moments, hitting that big three when it mattered to keep the Raptors rolling. So now, Eric, if you're okay, we're gonna transition over to some rapid fire questions. We're gonna title this segment Fab Five with Eric, and we'll have Daryl and Anwar go through these 5 questions with you.
Sure, no problem.
All right, first question. Which Toronto Raptor, past or present, was your favorite interview or favorite person to interact with?
Alvin Williams. And I'm lucky enough that I get a chance to work alongside him now. But I always said that if I had to approach this from a fan's perspective, if I, obviously I'm trying to be impartial, try to be professional over the years. But if I ever had to buy a jersey for myself, it would have been number 20. Awesome. And Alvin Williams. I think he's just a good person, a good man, let alone player. So that's probably the first name. The first thing comes to my mind. So I go with Alvin.
Awesome.
Right on. I see Amir smiling.
He's one of my personal favorites.
Favorite point guard.
Nice.
Yeah.
Question 2. If you could choose your nickname, what would it be and why?
Man, I like just E. Because it's just it's plain, it's simple. I've had a lot over the years. I'll tell you, I don't like Smitty. I've never liked Smitty, even going back to childhood and high school and whatnot. I just think it's kind of like, it's so easy and obvious. It's like, oh, Smitty, okay. Well, like, I've never really liked it, but I've had a lot. Like, I still have a couple of high school buddies to this day, and it never actually for whatever reason, and I'm somewhat glad, but it never stuck in college, and nobody ever picked up on it in my professional life or otherwise. But I actually have a couple of high school buddies that still call me Rick. They just dropped the E and just went with Rick. And I don't really like it, but it has become this like thing with these, like, I answer to it because I just know that that's what Mark and Brett call me. I get Rick all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I've actually got another guy, one of my closest friends. I mean, the guy that's best man at my wedding. He probably calls me Rico more than he calls me Eric, and that's another weird one too. Yeah, Federico. So like the list goes on. I've had other call that just go with plain Smith. John Wells, who used to be at TSN, and back in the day when the Fan and TSN actually did work together before the whole Bell Rogers thing. John Wells, and I think it was because, and listen, I'm being clear. I'm not trying to. I don't want to sound like arrogant or anything. But I think because at the time I was young, I wasn't married, I was the single guy and whatever else. Because otherwise I have no other explanation. He used to call me Hollywood. So he would come in and he's like, Hollywood, how you doing? What's the latest? Hollywood. And it stuck with some folks around the Fan where for a while it became Hollywood, but that got dropped quickly. So when I'm on the road right now with, Matt and Jack and Jonesy, Sherm, Chris Phillips, our director, and Dave Leader, our producer on the TV side, I would say 9 times out of 10, it's just E, and I'm good with that. So I'll go with E.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right, number three. You've obviously had an amazing sports broadcasting career. Is there something on your bucket list that hasn't been crossed off yet?
I mean, listen. A year ago, I would have said calling a game in the NBA Finals, let alone calling a NBA Finals victory. So that's amazing that I had the chance to cross that one off. You know what? I've honestly not thought about that beyond that, because I'm lucky enough to be broadcasting for the only team in the country. So you're kind of bound in some senses by what that brings.
Right.
You know, like if I was in the States and broadcasting for a collegiate team, it's like, okay, I want to call an NCAA finals, but then maybe my aspirations one day are to make it to the NBA and to make it to the NBA finals. I've had a chance to do that. So I'm still motivated to do it again,
right.
and to do it again and again, and multiple championships would be great. Yeah, like I would love to be, you know, calling a dynasty and doing this as much as possible. You know, you mentioned off the top some of the work that I've done in tennis to be able to call a championship match.
Right.
Some of the stuff I've done in baseball, I would love to, even if it's not working, I would love to attend and see in person the World Series one. I'm a big baseball fan, to be able to witness the World Series, let alone if I ever worked in baseball. I think stuff like that. And I'll tell you the other thing that I really enjoy, and it's part of the reason I started to do that midweek show on Instagram, and why I even enjoy doing stuff like this, is I've always enjoyed conversations and interviews. I love play-by-play. I love broadcasting games. But I like doing interviews with people and just having conversations and the long form interview style. And that's why to this day, you know, putting aside maybe some of the graphic or gratuitous stuff that he has done in the past and still does to this day, one of the things I love about Howard Stern is the long form interviews, when he gets guests on for an hour and a half and just talks to them, and you know, to watch some of the late night talk shows, not necessarily for the fluff and for the you know, for the made for social media little segments and things that they do, but for the interviews. I just enjoy that stuff. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but that's something that I would like to do more as my career goes on, to have some sort of a formal interview show where bringing guests on to talk, and not just basketball. Like, I feel like right now, if you told me, like, even on a minute's notice, let alone an hour or a day's notice, that I had to interview Austin Matthews or Wayne Gretzky or Roberto Alomar or Bo Bichette or whomever it may be, I feel like I could do it, because I think it's just a conversation. You know, you got to have some background. You got to do your research. You got to know about somebody. But at the same time, it just comes down to talking to a person, man to man, woman, you know, person to person, and just listening to the answers and then playing off the answers and having a conversation and just going from there. And that's something that I've always enjoyed, and that's something that I would love to do more as my career goes on.
Amazing. Number 4 is a two-part question. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore all-time NBA? And who would be on your all-time Raptors Mount Rushmore?
I know this is supposed to be rapid fire, but I know I'm not giving you quick. I'm not giving you quick and short answers here.
Love it.
Right off the bat, the first two easy that come to mind for me are obviously Jordan and LeBron. Man, I know I'm going to end up getting called out on this, because if I say one name, then people, how could you not have this name? Listen, I've always felt that it's not completely fair to talk about people that you didn't, you know, see firsthand.
Right.
Because, like, I could say Wilt Chamberlain, but I only know Wilt Chamberlain from what I've seen on video on YouTube and what I've read in record books. So it's not to say that he's not deserving, but I got to speak from my perspective, from what I've seen and witnessed in my own lifetime. So in saying that, LeBron and Jordan, for sure. Magic Johnson would be third. And man, after that, God, it's a toss-up. I literally have 7 names in my head right now that I could go with.
Let's hear them.
You know what? And now I'm gonna totally talk out of both sides of my mouth, because even though I didn't see it, how can I deny when somebody has double digits in rings? Like, how can you deny a Bill Russell? But honestly, like, okay, put it this way. I'm gonna cop out the answer then, because I'll give you 3. Jordan, LeBron and Magic locked in 3.
Okay.
But I'm willing to listen after that to Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaq, Kobe, Larry Bird, Oscar Robertson. I honestly don't know if I would go beyond that for a fourth, unless I'm completely brain cramping here. Like as good as Stockton, Malone, and Barkley were, as good as Pistol Pete, etc. I'm not. Oh shoot, I did forget one, of course, Kareem. He would be in that original mix too. And heck, if he was the fourth, he might be a great choice.
Yeah.
So again, I know I'm copping out a little bit, but I'll give you 3 of the 4. As far as the Raptors go, Kyle, Vince. This is tough too. Because listen, Kyle and Vince are no-brainers, and you know what, DeMar.
Right.
But then after that, you have to ask yourself: is the fourth one going to a guy that was a multi-time All-Star, that made it to the playoffs twice, that was a cornerstone of your franchise, but ultimately, and I'm not putting it all on him, ultimately was only in the playoffs twice in 7 years, and then left and had greater success with the Heat in Chris Bosh? Or are you giving it to a guy that was here for only 1 season, but yet was very, very instrumental in his 1 season in helping you bring a championship? So I'll say Kawhi, and I'll tell you why I'll say Kawhi, because I'm going to spin your question a little bit here. People have asked me about retiring the jersey, and I've said no to retiring Kawhi's jersey. So some might think, well, how are you going to put him on Mount Rushmore but not retire his jersey? And here's how I'm justifying it, at least in my head. I've said yes to putting a statue, but no to a jersey, because I'm willing to immortalize him, with the whether it be with the fade back look with the hand in the air and Embiid coming out, or whether it be in the crouch position looking up.
Yeah.
I don't care if I have to look at that statue for the next 50 years outside Scotiabank Arena. I think it would be amazing to immortalize that moment and that player in time via a statue.
Right.
I'm good with. Yeah. And to me, I guess I'm equating or comparing or drawing the same example. A statue and an etched mountain being the same.
Yeah.
To me, the jersey being retired, the number being retired, represents somebody that not just stood for or represented one moment or one season. It's a body of work.
Yeah.
It's not only what you did in a good season, it's what you did in the bad season. It's what you brought to the organization over the course of your time. It's what you brought to the city, away from the floor, to the country, on the floor and off the floor. And that's where what that number represents, it stands for more with Kyle, with Vince, with DeMar, than it does just for the 1 season with the number 2 for Kawhi. And again, I don't know that I'm right. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I completely
agree.
Yeah.
That's why I'm willing to give Vince the 15 retired. I'm willing to certainly give it absolutely to Kyle. And I'm definitely even willing to give it with DeMar. So those 3 are no-brainers for Mount Rushmore. And I guess I just inch Kawhi ahead of Bosh, who I have nothing but respect for as a player, let alone as a man, as a person. I would put him just ahead, I guess, because you can't deny what he did in that 1 season and how important he ultimately was to that 1 season.
Awesome.
All right, question 5. So what's the best piece of advice that you've received, whether in your personal or professional life?
I've been lucky enough to get a lot of great advice over the course of my career, because I've been, very fortunate to work with, a lot of very talented people. I mean, again, this isn't rapid fire. It's a very long answer. When I started at the Fan as an intern, I was working, as it relates specifically to basketball. I mean, I can give you a ton of names, but I was working alongside Elliot Friedman and George Stroumboulopoulos, and look at where they've gone on in their careers. When things took off within basketball, whether it's Paul Jones, Sherman Hamilton, Chuck Swirsky, Jack Armstrong, and then now Matt Devlin and Leo Routens. The people that I've worked alongside, that I've had a chance to be mentored by and to learn from, it's been incredible. So I think that with no disrespect to any of those people that I just mentioned, because they've all, and I don't mean this in cliche, I truly mean it, they've all helped me in some way, shape, or form. And I could give you a story on every single one of those people I just mentioned, and advice they've given me, or guidance they've given me as I've gone on in my career. But the one that sticks out maybe more than anybody is Jack, because Jack and I have formed a very strong bond and friendship over the years. I've told this story a couple times. I don't know if you guys had heard it or if you're aware or not, but Jack actually married my wife and I. I'm not a religious guy. So when my wife and I got married, and listen, I'm not here to speak critically or ill of anybody that is religious. It's a personal choice. Like whatever your religious affiliation or belief may be, I have nothing but respect for it. I just personally not a religious guy. So when I got married to my wife, I wanted to be married like outside in a park. I didn't want it in a church. It was kind of a non-traditional type thing. And as we went through the process of trying to figure out how we were going to be married, and my anniversary is actually coming up next week, 14 years with my wife. We decided, all right, we're just going to kind of go the justice of the peace route. And we ultimately found out, and I don't know if the rules have changed over the years, but 14 years ago at least, in Ontario, you just had to have a justice of the peace there to kind of make it legal. But the actual portion of the ceremony that they had to do was like 3%. They pretty much just had to say, I now pronounce you man and wife, or husband and wife, or whatever it may be. And they had to sign the paper. That's it. The other 97%, the welcome and the speech and the exchanging of vows and the, kiss the bride and all this stuff, that could be anybody. You didn't need to be an ordained minister or, do your thing online or whatever. Like you could just be anybody. So Jack, being a very close friend of mine, and he had gotten to know my girlfriend, fiance, and obviously then wife, he'd gotten to know her well. And I just felt that he's one of those guys that he's always been straight and honest with me and speaks from the heart, and he's passionate and he's just real. And I thought this could be the perfect guy. And my wife agreed, like, yeah, let's do it. So if you ever see pictures of my wedding, it's me and my wife, and right in the middle is the priest or the man presiding over the ceremony is Jack, and Jack's awesome. The one that handled the whole thing. So in saying that, he's a very important person in my life. He's again a friend, let alone a mentor. And I think Jack, and it's going to sound kind of very basic and maybe very cliche to you guys, but it's quite honestly just hard work. It's working hard. It's putting in the time. It's not taking things for granted. It's trying to do things with the right attitude. And listen, I fail on all those fronts many times. There's times where maybe I'm not the nicest guy, or maybe I'm not as prepared as I should have been, or maybe I've said no to something when I should have said yes, or maybe I haven't had a great attitude. And it's just trying to constantly reinforce yourself and retell yourself to do the work, to put in the time, to be good to people, to try and be the best you can in your career, let alone in your life, etc. And again, I fail regularly. Just this morning, my kid was mad at me for raising my voice to him, and that, so I got to be a better father and work on having a better attitude and all those things. So that's something where Jack, I think, has continued to kind of hammer that home with me as we've gone on as friends. And if I ever need advice, professionally speaking, let alone personally, he's one of the first calls I make. And I don't say this disrespectfully at all to my own father, who's still alive and healthy, and who I have a great deal of love and respect for. I probably call Jack as often, if not more, than my own father when it comes to looking for advice, just because he's coming at it from a different dynamic, working in the same industry as well. And so his perspective, knowing me as a person, let alone as a professional, often carries, at least as much and maybe even sometimes more clout than even my own family at times. So I have a great deal of respect for what Jack brings to the table and what he's told me. And I'll, again, twist your question a little bit and say the advice that I've given to people, in case you were going to ask that, is, yeah, work hard and everything. That's I don't want to steal Jack's kind of advice, but I've said that, going back to my passion for interviews and long form conversations and stuff even like this, I don't know if you guys have stuff written down in front of you, and I'm not here to criticize you if you did. I don't write questions down. I go into an interview where the questions I know I want to ask, I've either memorized them or they're in my head, or I've done my prep, I've done my work. And then I know the first question I'm going to hit somebody with out of the gate. But after that, either I know in my mind what my blueprint was and what the formulation of my conversation was intended to be. And if it turns out that that's where the conversation still goes and we head down that path, great. But if I'm not listening to somebody's answers,
Right.
I might miss a great opportunity for a follow-up or to extend a conversation on a certain subject. Or somebody says something inflammatory or crazy that I just need to follow up on and bring it in a different way, or whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
Because if you're so concentrated on looking down at your piece of paper and what question 2 is, what question 3 is, you're not really paying attention and you're not really listening. And like even doing this, guys, it's been a learning process for me over the last 4 months, doing Zoom calls and doing Instagram lives and whatnot. And I'm currently staring right at the camera, because to me, that's the equivalent of looking into your eyes.
Right.
Whereas opposed to, if I'm looking at Daryl right now, I'm doing this. And now I'm not really looking at you. So to me, it's like I tell my kid, eye contact, right? So it's like I'm trying to show you that I'm listening and that I'm paying attention. And I'm not doing one of these and looking around. So that's my advice that I give to young broadcasters a lot of time is eye contact for one, certainly, but don't write your questions down or try not to, and just listen and have a conversation and play off that and know your blueprint on your mind, because that's the preparation, as opposed to potentially looking somewhat prepared or having that crutch of having questions in front of you, and you don't really need it if you've really done your homework and if you've truly prepared yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's great advice.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Yeah, for that advice and just really, hammering that point home as well in terms of just overall preparation and doing your homework. And shout out to Jack as well in terms of all the advice and continued advice that he's instilled for you as well. So, Eric, where can our viewers and listeners stay connected to what you're doing at Sportsnet and Sportsnet the Fan 590, and even on your Instagram? And what are some things you can plug and promote that's upcoming?
Well, you mentioned the Instagram show that I've been doing midweek with Eric Smith. So I started that during COVID just to kind of keep myself fresh, and as I've said a few times now, to keep the conversation going for my own sake, even just let alone for the audience. So I was doing that on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, hence the reason I called it midweek, at 10 p.m. Eastern. I've scaled that back to Wednesday night only. So it's only 1 day a week now, and that's because I was, fortunate enough to have the bosses at the Fan approach me and Jonesy to do the daily show. So I just felt from a personal standpoint, from a family standpoint, I didn't want to take too much of my day away from my wife and son by doing, a show in the middle of the day 5 days a week, and then also doing a show at night 3 days a week. So I've scaled back midweek to just Wednesday nights, but you can still tune in Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. My Instagram handle, Eric _. So there's 2 underscores because there's so many damn Eric Smiths in the world. So Eric _Smith, Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. And I have the same Twitter handle as well, Eric _Smith. And then Smith and Jones on the radio live on Sportsnet 590 The Fan every day from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Just finished the show today and logged off and jumped on with you guys.
Awesome.
And if folks don't catch it live, or if you're listening outside the Greater Toronto area, you can listen online. Sportsnet.ca/590, and the podcast is available on Spotify. I should know this. I don't know if it's on iTunes, but I 100% know that it's on Spotify. So if you don't listen live, if you don't listen online, you can find it podcasted online on the Sportsnet website, or you can catch it on Spotify as well. And then, knock on wood, 3 weeks from now, if everything goes well with the NBA restart and with the bubble, then of course the Fan and TSN Radio and Sportsnet and TSN TV are going to be splitting games as per usual. So you'll catch me on the radio side, or hopefully on the TV side, because quite honestly, I don't even know how that's going to work right now, if there's going to be a role for a sideline guy when there are no sidelines to do. So
I was just going to ask you that.
My TV work may be, cut a lot or cut completely, or maybe I'll be just kind of shifted into kind of doing something else within the TV realm. So hopefully there's still a role for me. But either way, Sportsnet, The Fan, whatever it is, I'll be involved in the NBA, and things will get even busier in a few weeks. So if you like me, you won't tire of me, and if you're tired of me, you're going to get real tired of me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric. For taking the time to spend time with us, and we hope we can do this again in the future.
All right, fellas, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Okay.
There you have it, guys. As episode 12 of Beyond the Court comes to a close with our special guest, the one and only Eric Smith of Sportsnet and Sportsnet The Fan 590. Don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button. And we'll have also all the details of what Eric had just mentioned in the video description below. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care, be safe, and stay blessed.